He was angry. It seemed an understatement, but it was all he could think. Thoughts swirled in his mind as he desperately tried to understand why, how, or what he was supposed to do. Nothing would stick, however. All that did was his rage, at Ozpin, at Wiess, at himself. A part of him wondered if he was lucky. Confronting Ozpin head-on hadn't just been a bad idea. It had been foolish in the extreme. At the end of the day, though, his first point was correct. Ozpin needed him. He couldn't do anything to him out of fear of what Wiess's reaction would be. He couldn't even remove him from Beacon temporarily. Wiess would want to know why. The new form maiden would follow him. Wiess. Wiess was the new form maiden. It felt like a fish striking his gut. How had he not read the signs? Wiess's desperation for the date made sense now. A painful amount of sense. She'd met with Ozpin and learned of the risk, and no doubt wanted a memory to hold on to. Or to not have any regrets if she died. No. Jaune shook his head, taking deep breaths. He couldn't think like that. Not here. Not now. He had to think of how he was going to help. What he was going to do. Wiess had been chosen as the maiden. She'd gone and accepted it long in advance when Pyrrha might have as well, which was par for the course with his frustrating partner. That she hadn't told him was expected. She always did things on her own. She was headstrong and brave. He wasn't sure whether he hated Ozpin or himself more. Ozpin, the bastard. He had been the one to do this, but he always did. This was necessary lest they wanted Cinna to just walk in and kill Amber. This had to always happen, and it always did. What didn't always happen was Pyrrha being passed over as the maiden. In fact, it had never happened. And that was where he came into fault. Even ignoring the fact that I should have been aware of the possibilities. I was the one who pushed Wiess into it. She accepted this because she wanted to look after me and the others. He growled under his breath and ran a hand down his face. I was too focused that things would go the way they always do. That things would always be the same. Just because they had been every other time. It was easy to fall into that trap. But in his defense, there had never been a case where Pyrrha wasn't the maiden. Other than those times when Beacon fell before the festival ever happened, in which case it didn't matter anyway. The line of thought was pointless. He was distracting himself from what lay ahead, what lay in the infirmary he now stood outside of. Wiess was inside. But would she be Wiess anymore? He clenched his eyes shut and entered. Jaune looked up from the bed she stood behind. Oh, Jaune. I wondered when you would arrive. Your teammates were asking after you. Wiess was on the bed. She was unconscious. Peaceful. His rage and anger fled in an instant, replaced instead with a sense of worry and grief. He only had eyes for her, and it took a 3 seconds of him checking for injuries before he even recognized he'd been addressed. They were here? He asked. They received a message from the headmaster saying your partner had been hurt. They arrived quickly, but I sent them off once I'd done an initial check. The faunus tapped Wiess's forehead. She will be fine. Her aura was low, almost disturbed. I managed to calm it and give her a booster to help her recover. Jaune nodded, watching the doctor with a wary eye. Jaune didn't seem to know the truth, which made sense from Ozpin's point of view. After a few seconds, he nodded, willing to accept she was innocent in this. Thank you, Jaune. I appreciate it. He glanced to the door. I'll be staying here with her. I don't have any spare beds. There were several empty ones nearby, but he couldn't be bothered to challenge her. I only need a chair. I'll be staying awake. The two stared at one another. Jaune sighed. I can't be bothered to argue with you. I know full well how that will go. She waved a hand. Fine. Do what you will. If you disturb any of my patients, however, then I'll tie you to my bed. And we will not be pointedly joined at the hip. She narrowed her eyes. And you will be filled with needles. I won't cause a scene, he said, drawing a chair up to Wiess's bed and sitting down. Jaune watched him for a few moments, but eventually sighed and shook her head. She left him with a huff, though not before warning him to let his team know. I don't need them breaking down my door asking where you are. I'll tell them. I promise. She nodded and left, leaving him alone with his injured partner. Jaune stood from his seat, paddling over to her side. His hand fell onto the metal bar around the bed, before he reached up gently to brush some white hair from her forehead. Wiess didn't stir. She was vulnerable like this. Very vulnerable. If Cinder found out what happened, she'd come and kill Wiess herself. He had to stay for that very reason. Stay and protect her. He considered telling Ozpin about Cinder and their meeting. He'd have passed it off as Silver's knowledge. In the end, he decided against it. And it wasn't just because he was angry enough to want Ozpin dead. Cinder wasn't necessary for the attack on Beacon to happen, but he knew what would take place if she was still in charge. If she wasn't, then things could go in any direction. Worse, and far more likely, she would smell Ozpin's attack coming and flee. Without the Paladins here, it would only be students and teachers she would need to break her way past, and break out she would. It would cause untold death and destruction, and wouldn't even stop her. She would still come back for Wiess. She would still orchestrate the fall of Beacon. But he would have no idea where she was. He would never be able to find or stop her if she stalked away into the shadows. It was better Cinder remained here, in the open, where he could watch her. His eyes fell back onto Wiess. You're such an idiot, he whispered. Why would you be willing to risk your life like this? I'm the only one who should. It doesn't matter if I live or die. You? It would matter if you died. She couldn't answer him, even if he'd known what it would be. Wiess's face would contort in anger, her lips drawing thin. What is that supposed to mean? She would growl, and then poke him in the chest angrily until he explained. She wouldn't accept it, wouldn't believe it. She certainly wouldn't put up with it. Jaune's chest ached. His forehead came down to rest atop the cool metal. Please be you when you wake up, he begged. Please. I can't. I won't accept it being someone else. This was uncharted territory. He had no idea if she would survive this, or if she would still be herself if she did. With a mind filled with doubt and fear, Jaune sat down and drew Kuroko Moors. He leaned back, placing one foot on the door so that he would wake if it opened. If Cinderfall came, he would be ready. In the end, Ozpin had won, hadn't he? He secured his knight. The maiden would have her protector. Damn Ozpin. Damn Wiess. Damn himself. She awoke to pain. It slammed into her mind the moment consciousness was regained, and her groan was cut off by an immediate gasp as it washed over her. Blue eyes snapped open, and then winced against bright light that glared down on her. She moved one hand over them, and the sudden change from light to shadow also sent pain rocketing through her skull. Nausea pooled in her stomach too. She wanted to be sick. But she also recalled what had happened. The basement, the medicine, the comatose woman, the lightning, the pain, the aura, the power. Her teeth clenched together, a sharp whine escaping her. Whatever she imagined, this pain was 10 times worse. Focus, she told herself. I need to focus. Who am I? I'm wiess. The answer was immediate, obvious. She didn't think she ever felt so relieved. That's right. I'm wiess. Wiess Snee. Heiress to the STC. I have a father, a mother, a brother and sister. I'm in Beacon, and winter is here. I accepted Ozpin's offer. That's right, I have the maiden's powers. I'm about to throw up. Her eyes sought for a bucket or anything she could use. There was nothing in sight, but once she started to retch, she realized there was nothing inside of her either. The vomit never came, both a blessing and a curse. There was no mess, but she also still felt terrible. That stopped as her eyes fell on the figure beside her bed. She wasn't even surprised, even if she was secretly a little pleased. He was asleep, 1 foot on the door, leaning on her bed, his sword in his lap. He must have stayed for her. Wiess felt a warm sensation pool in her stomach. A small smile spread across her face. How typical of... The smile fell. Fear replaced it. A name. Why couldn't she remember a name? Her eyes widened, chest rising and falling as she hyperventilated. No. This wasn't possible. She knew him. She loved him. She was certain. His name. She had to have his name. She couldn't forget his name. He'd done things for her. He nearly died for her. Hadn't he? Who was he anyway? Was he someone important? Weiss's eyes opened as wide as they could. They ached, almost bloodshot as she bit down on her lip, drawing blood. Both hands came up to grip her forehead, fingers and nails digging deep into her scalp. A scream almost escaped her, but she was breathing too hard to put anything into it. This couldn't be happening. She had to. Nothing would make sense if she couldn't. All of this would have been for nothing. He was her partner. He was important. This was all for him. Name. Her mouth snapped open. Jaune! The desperate scream woke him. His sword came up, aimed towards the door. But it bounced off the woodwork there, surprising him. He fell back, his hips banging against the bed. And it was that which seemed to remind him where he was. Wide eyes turned to Wiess. Wiess? Her arms wrapped around his waist. Jaune, she whispered. It's you, Jaune. She tested the word, forced it into her mind, remembered it. Yes, he was Jaune, her partner, the man she loved. She couldn't believe that for a moment. She'd almost forgotten. The transfer. It hadn't been as safe as they hoped. It was my every fear confirmed. She'd almost forgotten him, because to the last full maiden, he was nothing but a stranger. Not to me, she hissed. He's not a stranger to me. Get out of my mind. You're not welcome here. It took her a second to realize she wrapped herself around Jaune's waist, or that she had her face pressed into the small of his back. Wiess? How was she supposed to explain this? Fortunately, he saved her the effort. He broke out of her hold, his sword going down at the side of the bed as his hands cupped hers. Are you okay? He asked. Wiess, are you alright? Oh, thank God. He saved her the need to come up with an excuse. Wiess smiled, fighting past the nausea she felt. I'm fine. She noticed his less than believing expression. I'm sick, she amended. I feel bad because of a headache and nausea. I'm okay though. Do you? He hesitated. His expression tightened. Do you remember why you're here? Remember? What a curiously terrifying word. Her breath caught for a moment, but he couldn't know the truth. This was too dangerous for that. I remember, she said carefully. You went out for a walk and left us free in our room. His eyes relaxed. It looked as though a weight had been removed from his shoulders. That's right, he said. We won the fight in the tournament, remember? We? She teased, earning a small smile from him. I won the fight. Yang helped. Of course. I'll be sure to tell her that. His smile slipped away. What happened after? What caused this, wiess? It was an accident. His lips tightened. What kind of accident? A training accident, she lied. I went to winter to try and train my family semblance. I've never had good control over it, and I wore myself out. She refused to meet his eyes. I guess I passed out from the strain. My aura must have been low. Jaune said your aura was disturbed. That would explain it. Would it? She swallowed and looked up at him. What do you mean with that? It's what happened. Don't you believe me? The door slammed open before he could reply. Yang stormed in. Blake was close behind her. It both relieved and upset her that she remembered their names so easily, where she'd nearly forgotten Jaune's. What else would have changed? She needed to keep an eye out. What happened? Yang growled. We got a text from Ozpin last night saying you were hurt. Then another from Jaune saying he was going to keep an eye on you. Both were low on detail, Blake added, setting a less than impressed look toward their leader. It wasn't his fault, wiess defended. He only just found out himself. I was training with my sister on my semblance. I lost control and, well, this was the result. I'll be fine. Your semblance? Yang looked like she wanted to ask more, but didn't. She shook her head instead. Are you really that eager to win the tournament? I mean, it's just like you. I know, but couldn't you have warned us so we didn't spend all night worrying? I'm sorry. You better be. Yang smiled and punched her arm. It was barely a tap. She must have looked awful for Yang to treat her so gently. Zui was worried sick as well. You owe him an apology too. He looked like he thought the two of you have died when you didn't come back. Wiess laughed. I'm sorry. I'll say sorry to him as well, I promise. You can't compete in the tournament, Jaune said. His voice was flat, his face even flatter. Why did he look at her so? Yang balked. What? Is it that bad? I guess it is, wiess said. In truth, she knew she wouldn't have been able to compete anyway. The power she had might manifest, and it wouldn't be safe for her to reveal that on the most televised event across all of Remnant. She bowed her head, guilt rising up inside of her. I'm sorry. I was reckless and I've let you all down. It was reckless and stupid. Her eyes widened. Jaune! Yang hissed, and this time gave him a punch that neither looked nor sounded gentle. Ignore him, wiess. He's just worried about you and is showing it in his own usual stupid way. Don't sweat it. I'll go into the singles and I'll bring back victory for the jazziest team in Beacon. Yang grinned. Well, second jazziest team. I think those guys we smashed claimed that title. Wiess managed a small smile, but it wasn't quite able to take her eyes off Jaune. Why had he been so quick to condemn her? He wasn't normally like that, not when one of them was hurt. Even now, he refused to look at her, and she couldn't miss how tense his shoulders were. nor how white his knuckles were and his hands were clenched into fists. Had she done something wrong? Blake and Yang didn't look pleased at the idea. She didn't miss how Blake's eyes narrowed, nor how Yang mouthed something. Jaune shook his head and sighed. "It's fine," he said. "We'll sort something out." He wasn't very convincing. The door opened again before she could think more on it. This time, it wasn't her friends which entered, but rather the one responsible for her current situation. Wiess tried to sit a little taller as Ozpin entered, but Jaune's hand touched her shoulder, pushing her back down. She didn't appreciate that, but felt far too weak to argue. "Miss Schnee," the headmaster greeted, "and her team. Good morning to you all. I trust you are all well today." "Better than I was before, sir," Wiess said, hoping to make it clear her mind was still her own. Ozpin nodded, not showing any overt signs of relief. She assumed there was some, however. "Thank you for letting my team know about my training accident with Winter. It was silly of me to take a risk with my semblance." If the headmaster was surprised by her excuse, he didn't show it. "Not a problem," he said. "Your sister alerted me, and I thought it only fair to let your team know. I wouldn't want them to worry." Jaune snorted. "How considerate of you." Wiess tapped his arm in warning. "Don't be rude," she whispered. What was up with him? If Ozpin was offended, he didn't show it. "It is of no concern. Tell me, Miss Schnee, how do you feel? Are there any complications you've noticed? Anything that is perhaps wrong?" Wiess opened her mouth to speak, but Jaune beat her to it. "Are you a doctor now, sir?" he asked, voice overly polite. Shouldn't she be having this conversation with Sunair? Or perhaps a Dr. Oblek? I'm not sure why you're here at all, unless you intend to offer medical advice. Are you licensed for that? Yang and Blake's mouth were open, but neither of them were as horrified as she. "Jaune!" she hissed, tugging his arm with one hand. "I'm sorry, sir. Please forgive him. He stayed up all night waiting for me to recover. He's tired." "There's no reason to apologize," their headmaster chuckled. "I can understand Mr. Ark's feelings at the moment. This is the kind of treatment we hope to foster in all of our teams. Besides, he is not wrong. I am not qualified to offer you medical advice." Wiess had no idea how they dodged that bullet, but she'd take it. Her fingers tightened around Jaune's wrists, and even though she felt weaker than before, it was enough to stop him. "Thank you, sir. I feel sick, but I don't think there've been any side effects." Ozpin just wanted to know if her mind was still her own, she supposed. It was, but things weren't quite yet perfect. Did he want to speak with her alone? It made sense. Wiess sighed and looked to her team. Jaune's eyes met hers. They seemed to know exactly what she was about to suggest. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. Ugh. Why did he suddenly have to be so stubborn? "Not a problem," Ozpin said. "In truth, I just spoken to Miss Sunair. She says you'll be free to leave today if you wish. You may feel a little weakened at first, but so long as you don't fight, it won't be a problem." Wiess nodded, a little revealed. Revealed, hee. Yeah, I'm leaving that bit in. My bad. I'm just a dumbass. Alright, let's get back to it. Where was I? Yeah. Wiess nodded, a little revealed. Fucking did it again! Wiess nodded, a little relieved. There hadn't been any physical problems then. That was good. "I'll excuse myself for now," he went on, adjusting his glasses and taking a sip from his mug. "Should anything occur that appears alarming, I trust you'll let someone know." "She will," Jaune answered immediately. "Trust me. Someone will let you know in person." That sounded like a threat. Wiess's skin paled, eyes darting between the two men. Although no overt emotion appeared on either's face, It felt like they might attack one another at any given moment. It was the headmaster who looked away, speaking no words but turning for the door. It was only when it closed that her partner relaxed. Wiess did not. "What was that?" she asked, voice a sibilant hiss. "Are you insane? You can't just speak to the headmaster of Beacon like that. I can't believe you. What were you thinking?" Jaune rounded on her. His eyes looked like twin storms. His teeth were barred. He growled. "What was I thinking?" "No, Wiess. What were you thinking?" "That he's the headmaster. You were acting out. That's not..." Jaune cut off and shook his head. "No. You know what? Forget it. This is just you being you. I don't know what you mean." "Oh yeah, I'm sure you don't," he drawled sarcastically. "I'm sure you have no idea at all." Yang coughed loudly, taking a step forward to put herself between the two. "Yeah, well, two people who don't is me and Blake. Is there something going on here? I think we deserve to know." Jaune looked to her. "I don't know. Ask Wiess." Wiess quelled between the combined looks from the three concerned teammates. She felt her stomach roll, not to mention her pulse quicken. This wasn't how she expected the day to go, to be fair. She hadn't thought much of what would come after the transfer process. To her, all that had filled her mind was fear. "It's nothing," she lied. "I don't know why you're so insistent." She shook her head. "Why are you so angry with me?" "Why?" Jaune scowled. "Why? He sighed. "I'm not angry, Wiess. I'm worried. Concerned." He muttered something under his breath. Something about things being different. Wiess tried to understand, but as ever, it was Jaune. It was hard to understand what he meant. "Well, that's fine if you're worried, but I feel terrible," she said. "Can't we save the arguments until later? Maybe when the room isn't spinning so badly?" "Fine. I guess that might be for the best." His frown softened, ice roving over her face. "I am glad you're okay, Wiess. I was worried." Damn it. Did he have to say something like that so suddenly? There wasn't a person in the room who didn't know her feelings for him. Yet she still felt like hiding her blush. Why couldn't she stay angry at him? Maybe it would have been best if he stayed angry with her. Oh, she liked that. "Yang, I will kill you." "Wiess, you don't even look like you can stand straight, let alone do damage. Here, let me help you up." It's okay, I've got her." Jaune interrupted. She felt one of his hands touch her back, helping her up into a sitting position. The covers fell, and she breathed a sigh of relief when she realized she still had her normal outfit on underneath. There probably hadn't been time to change it, nor that she would have appreciated any of the teachers doing that. "Thank you," she whispered, as he gently lowered her feet to the floor. She wondered if they would be strong enough to support her. She stumbled for a moment, but quickly caught herself on his sleeve. Tired muscles kicked in soon after and she was able to move, a belt with his support. "My legs are just tired," she said, more to explain away the worry than anything else. "I'll be okay once I get some fresh air and activity." "And food," he warned. "You're not skipping a meal." "That's ironic coming from you." He chuckled and might have said something, but her mind swam before she could catch it. Something felt awkward, wrong. The world was different. Was she shorter than normal? No, she was being foolish. Her mind was playing tricks on her. That was all. Jaune helped her out of the room, Blake holding the door open for the both of them while Yang brought up the rear. Thankfully, the corridors were clear and Wiess stepped off to the left. She didn't get any further, however, as Jaune's arms tugged her to a halt. "What?" She asked, "If you're thinking food now, then I really need to wash my face and get changed. Can't we go back to the dorm room first?" "We are." "You're headed the wrong way." Wiess blinked. "Don't be silly. Room 114 is this way. It's on the west wing." "Wiess." Jaune's face was almost distressed. "Our room is 209. "What?" "Yeah, Wiess." Yang laughed. "Did you hit your head when you fell or something?" Oh god." "Something like that." She laughed, accepting defeat and allowing Jaune to lead her. The halls were familiar, but a part of her screamed that this wasn't right. She'd been in room 114, she was sure. That was where the dorm had always been. Hadn't it? Cinder had noticed something was wrong from the moment she woke that morning. There had been a difference inside of her, something that originated in her stomach, and it spread throughout her as the hours ticked by. Her team noticed, of course. None of them dared raise the issue, however, too afraid that it might attract her ire. They were wise to do so. The unsettling feeling had left her anxious, and their ability to continue in the torment, while not devastating, was an annoyance. Mercury and Emerald were already on thin ice. This only made things worse. Her eyes narrowed, an angry sigh escaping her. So, Osmond had made his move, had he? How interesting. The maiden, Amber, had died. She felt it happen. There was a new full maiden. Some other fool who had chosen to take on a power that didn't belong to them. A power promised to her. That was fine. It was no problem whatsoever. Cinder smiled and stored away her scroll, beckoning for her team to follow her to the Colosseum for the day. Whomever this new maiden was, they would simply have to die.